Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joanne Stevens, and this is our Thursday call-in show. I want to welcome our listeners, and in a moment, I'll be introducing our guest, Shawna Isaac from the Des Moines, Iowa Police Department. And before I introduce Shawna, I want to remind everybody that our topic today is crime-free multi-family housing. And this is going to be a very information-rich, idea-rich program about things we can do as multifamily operators and mobile home park operators to try to make our properties safer, both to protect the property and for our residents. So before I introduce Shawna, I want to remind people of a few things. There's a number of events that are coming up in the mobile home park business, and next week, August 7th, is the annual RV mobile home induction for the Hall of Fame in Elkhart, Indiana. All of these items I'm going to mention are on the website. You can go to joannemstevens.com and click on Save the Date, and there will be links there on how you can find out more information or get or register. The next event, September 6th, 7th, and 8th, the George Allen Annual International Networking Roundtable in Indianapolis. You can click on, there's information on that and how to get registered. MHI, Manufactured Housing Institute, is having their annual meeting September 17th, 18th, and 19th in Orlando. And there's a few other events also that you can learn about. I will be speaking at the George Allen event on how to prepare for selling a park. And then also I'll be speaking at the New York Housing Association event in Verona, New York, October 5th and 6th. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, Shawna Isaac. And Shawna has been with the police department in Des Moines for 9 years, and she teaches a course for multi-family property owners in Des Moines. One of our managers attended it, and he thought it was very worthwhile. And not only did he get a lot of good ideas that we're starting to implement, but he also came back with a manual of ideas for us to refer back to. And Shawna has explained that she has noticed a decrease in police calls from attendees of this course. So without any further introduction, I'm going to have Shawna join the call. Shawna, are you on the call?
I am here.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank
and so how long have, tell us if you would, what led to this, you offering this program for multifamily owners?
Well, the police department adopted this program back in the 90s. It was originated in Mesa, Arizona back in 92. Des Moines brought it here in 1995. So it's been around for a while.
Okay.
I took the program over in 2015 because we have so many rental communities, and a rental community really can vary from a single family home that is just being rented to someone to a multiplex that has hundreds of people to mobile home parks. It can be just about anything. So we have a big demand based on the fact that we have a lot of these, diverse rental communities. So that's why we're paying so much attention to it now, because when you have these, these setups where all these people are living together, you're going to have isolated areas where it seems like there's a lot more crime. So you need to know how to deal with it.
Sure, sure. And I know you were saying that when you are noticing that a property is getting calls, police calls, and the police are going to the property, what do you, how do you handle that with, do you contact the property owner about getting involved in your program and taking the course?
Yeah, I try to reach out to as many property owners, property managers, leasing specialists, basically anybody that's in that power seat at the property. And I ask them first and foremost if I can just have maybe 20 minutes of their time so that I can tell them the ins and the outs and the benefits of the program. And then from there, it's whatever we can do to get them on board, because ultimately, if I can get them participating in as much capacity as they're willing to do, then the program itself will show them the value behind what the offering is.
And you know, I'm sure you're seeing benefits from the program, but tell us, if you would, what are the benefits for the owners and for the residents of these rental communities?
Well, let's start with the owners. From the owners or the management standpoint, the benefit is going to be resources, because we have so many resources available through the police department that otherwise maybe would not even be known of. And an example of that is going to be, pulling the crime stats for the area or pulling the trip logs to show incident reports. Those can be very useful tools if you have a problem unit that needs special attention. But it's also a networking aspect, because maybe if I can get that particular property manager in contact with some of the others around them, then they can, share information on issues they're having. Maybe they can join resources if there's some kind of a crime epidemic for their area, whatever it might be. So networking is always very valuable. And then we're a great idea sounding board. Some of the stuff that they deal with kind of crosses over into civil law. And as police officers, we are primarily there to deal with criminal law. But nonetheless, we can give them a lot of ideas based on the fact that we're in this environment a lot. And then sometimes maybe put them in contact with the right people in the civil arena to help take care of whatever their issue may be. Okay. So that's really the benefit from the management side. And then from the renters side or from the occupancy side, I mean, anytime that you're improving the quality of life and bringing down crime, I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
It does. I think as property managers and property owners, we can never guarantee people's safety, but it's always a good thing in our marketing, or when people are considering the apartment or the mobile home or a single family rental, that we can tell them, and here are the steps that we are taking to have this be as safe as possible for the residents.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things too that I'm finding as a real estate agent is that more and more, when an investor is considering buying a property, they are checking the police records to see how many calls the police are getting on those properties, and that is a factor in, all things being equal, the property with fewer calls, or ideally no calls, is going to that's the one they're going to be more interested in acquiring.
Oh, absolutely. I get calls here at the police department from prospective new clients for a certain property, no matter where it may be, just wanting to know if it's a safe neighborhood, what is the history of this property, what types of crimes are we seeing. But then let's remember too, if something does blow up in that area, no one wants to have their property be in the forefront of the media, and God forbid that should happen. You definitely want to have the right kind of crime stats backing the fact that you are being an active property manager, because you don't want to be condemned, in the public forum either.
Well, yeah, that's another good point, that we never know when a property will have the spotlight on them by the media for any reason, and it's always a good thing when you can have a history of what you're doing to be proactive in either dealing with, preventing a problem, or applying a remedy to a problem. And so tell us some of the topics that are covered in your course and in your manual, Shawna.
Yeah, absolutely. So the phase 1 management training, it's a 3-phase program, and phase 1 is where we educate the people that work at the property. And it can be anyone from the ownership all the way down to maintenance, because there's value behind all of the topics. But we cover everything from the application and leasing process, level 101, all the way to the more specific, 3-day clear and present danger things, because, in every class that we do, we'll ask everybody to go around the room and say how long they've been in the business. And inevitably, we'll have a huge range. The last class that I did back in June, we had someone that had just gotten into the business and had been in it for 4 months, and we had someone in the class that had been doing this for 22 years. So we cover some of this that might be repeat for some people, but nonetheless, if it's repeat, maybe it'll sharpen some of those memory skills on what they should or shouldn't be doing. But we cover the application process. We talk about community rules and lease agreements. We talk about building communities versus complexes. And we spend a lot of time on active property management. We also cover Section 8 housing. We talk about, as I mentioned, 3-day clear and present dangers, non-compliances, notices, evictions. We have the Civil and Human Rights Division come in and talk about some of the no-nos to help people stay out of trouble. We have the fire department come in and talk about some safety and prevention. We talk about illegal activity specific to the drug world. And we talk about knowing your resources. Not everything is going to be a police matter. And that's why we try to equip the people that attend this class with as much knowledge as we can. And so we hand out information from the Neighborhood Inspections Division, the places where they get their rental certificates and have to meet those regular requirements to be current in operation. So it's not always just a police matter, but we try to bring all these other elements in to make them more successful, because all these pieces do work together.
And something you said early in your last statement, where you talked about having a multifamily property, and the difference between that and the community. And in your view, or in the police department view, what's the difference between a multifamily community and a multifamily property?
I'm going to give you a really simple example. We are in a modern era where we are all so busy and so preoccupied with getting from point A to point B, we're losing that sense of community or neighborhood. And it doesn't matter if you live in a traditional row house neighborhood or if you're in an apartment complex with 300 units, you still have that ability to have a sense of community. And so what we really want managers to focus on is turning their area, their property or properties, if they manage multiples, into a community, so that there's a little bit more of a vested interest from the people that live there. They care a little bit more. Maybe they clean up their trash a little bit better. Maybe they watch out and report suspicious occurrences in the parking lot a little bit more, because now they have faces and names to go with the people that live around them, instead of, generic titles that they might otherwise attach to people. We're trying to really create that sense of caring and an invested interest for them as well.
Well, that's, I think people are craving that sense of community, no matter where they live, if it's in a mobile home park or a very large apartment complex. I think the conventional wisdom a lot of times is, well, people just don't know their neighbors, but most people really do want to know their neighbors, no matter where they live, both from a security, crime aspect, but just from a human being aspect.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with you 100% there. You don't have to like your neighbor, but you should at least know who they are and who belongs in your area.
Right, right. And so one of the things that I am seeing in the mobile home park business, not just in Iowa, but in a number of states, and I'm wondering if you're seeing this too, is that there are more and more non-local property owners. In other words, somebody from Southern California buys an apartment property in Des Moines.
We see that quite a bit. Quite a bit.
But they do have on-site people. And do you find that does that add more of a challenge to your work, or are you finding they're more on board with what you have to offer and cooperating and using the resources? What are you seeing?
It can provide a little bit more of a challenge, but typically when I make a contact, I like to go out and hopefully get a face-to-face contact with whoever the on-site person is going to be, because that person is going to have more of, we'll call it a sense of investment as well than maybe a person who's 2,000 miles away and only sees the bottom line in black or red. So I want to make contact with whoever's actually there every day, because those are the people that know who's coming and going. Those are the people that are developing a sense of caring for the residents and wanting to find ways to improve the area for the kids that live there. You know, those are the people I need to make contact with. Usually when I go in, I'm going to have a bunch of crime statistics to back up what I'm saying. I can talk all day long about the benefits of a program and how scientifically proven it is, but if I can show them on paper just what's happening at their property and break it down to the type of crimes that might be occurring, that's really going to speak loads way more than I could ever do. So then when I start making recommendations for improvement, I have just then and there enabled that manager to communicate with whoever is above him or her in such a way that they're going to be more successful if they're asking for additional funds or improvements to the property.
Sure, sure. And Shawna, I want to ask you too about one of your topics that you cover is crime prevention through environmental design. What is that?
So we call it CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. It's the acronym. And basically, it's a concept that our goal there is to reduce the opportunities for crime that may be inherent in the design of structures or the design of neighborhoods. So basically, we're taking the environmental aspects and we're doing what we can to reduce what they may encourage crime through. So a good example is going to be the trimming of trees and bushes. Your property might be surrounded by a very forested area, and we know that obviously it's not going to be an option to go down and mow down a forest. We would never want that, but there are certain elements that can be incorporated in the portion that is designated for the property, as far as keeping the trees and bushes properly trimmed up or adding the right kind of lighting, because if you have, we'll say, a home grade light system versus a commercial grade light system for a very large area, your output's going to be very poor. And that's also going to be an invitation to crime if the area is very dark. So we have certain principles that we teach during the CPTED portion to where we're trying to maybe illuminate, if you will, the concepts and just give a second look when people start walking through their own properties.
And Shawna, maybe this is beyond what the police department offers, but are there grants or are there ways for people to get the property owners to get funding to do more lighting for their properties?
There are some ways. A lot of times, whatever local power company you have in your area will offer some kind of a rebate program. So you may be able to get some assistance in upgrading the types of lights, maybe to some of those high efficiency LEDs or stuff of that nature. So sometimes if you work through them or with them and let them come out and do their own light survey, you can get additional assistance in that. I'm not sure specifically on any kind of federal grants at this point in time, but those tend to come and go, and when they're available, they usually have a very short deadline.
Sure, sure. And I think also that is something that property owners should definitely check on. Besides, so the trimming bushes and trees and lighting, any other things come to mind?
Yeah, I've got an entire checklist of things that I go through. So once a property has decided they think that they're at the level where they're going to pass a CPTED survey, I will send them a 7-point checklist. And these 7 points are mandatory pass-fail criteria for the program. You either pass them or you don't when it comes to CPTED. So with those 7 points, the checklist, we are looking at things, first and foremost, the lighting, because we've talked about that. So at night, I should be able to walk across that property and not completely disappear into the darkness. I'm not saying it has to be lit up like a stadium, but I should at least not completely disappear.
Sure.
We use a 3-7 rule with trees and bushes. We want the bushes no higher than 3 feet, and we want the trees, the part that hangs down, we don't want that lower than 7 feet. So basically, you've got that period between the 3 and the 7 foot mark where it's clear visibility. We look at strike plates. We recommend strike plate screws have either a 2 or 3 inch length to them, because then obviously it's going to go more into the framing structure and it's going to make it harder to kick a door in. We need doors that have good deadbolt locks. We need doors that have eye viewers or a way for the occupant on the inside to verify who's on the outside before they either leave or let someone in.
Sure.
And then the last two elements of SEPTED are lift and slide protection for all windows and sliding doors. So it sounds like a lot, but really most of that is stuff that's already built in when you get your rental certificate approved through whatever neighborhood division you're in.
Well, that sounds like those items would go a very long way to preventing crime. And tell us what kind of results that you're seeing from this SEPTED certification.
So a lot of times when I come in and do a SEPTED survey for most properties, it's usually the lighting that hangs them up. They usually need to add either a little bit or a lot of lighting. So most of the time, from when I do my first walkthrough to the time where they reach full SEPTED certification, it generally takes a period of time of about a year. But that's because most managers are trying to slowly implement the changes and the upgrades in without completely shattering their bottom line.
Yeah.
So once they get that done and we start doing crime comparisons, you can generally see a very steady decrease in the type of crime activities that would generally prey upon. And I'm going to use suspicious persons as an example. I'm going to use car burglaries as an example, general thefts and graffitis, anything that they can do under the cover of night. We're taking away that element of remaining hidden and anonymous, and almost right away they start seeing results.
That's quite a statement. That's great that you're having so much success. And I think one of the things I know that is covered in the program is resident screening. And are you seeing owners doing more screening, or is it about the same as in the past?
I see a lot of the commercial property owners doing screening. Most of them have a process in place for all of their locations, and they have a screening company on file that helps them to vet, and verify the different applications they receive. Where I generally see a lack of screening process is when you have smaller people that don't operate on that big corporate level, where they're just doing a few rentals here and there to bring in extra money. And maybe it's because they don't want to put the money into it, because screening can be expensive. But part of what we teach in the class is ways to kind of screen and verify your people through open information sources. And sometimes they just don't know, and sometimes they just don't care. But usually about the time when they get that real problem tenant in there that they can't get rid of, and now they've got one specified crime letter after another coming from the city telling them that we've got issues at their property, then they'll call me and they want to know, how are we going to get rid of this person? And my first question is always going to be, what kind of screening did you do, so that I know what I'm dealing with? And then are we going to start implementing crime and screening and other concerns of that nature to prevent crime after I help you get rid of your problem? Right.
And I think one thing that has been in the news, a topic that has been that's being talked about now, is as people, convicted felons, are looking for housing and being released from prison, or what are the standards for leasing to people with convictions?
Every property is a little bit different. We recommend that whatever their standard is going to be, they have a written policy and they enforce it consistently. So don't change it from one person to another. We have some places, and I'm just going to give you some examples of what I see more commonly, because this varies. We have some places that automatically eliminate certain types of crimes, and those certain types of crimes that are automatic would include murder, attempted murder convictions, and in a lot of cases, human smuggling convictions, stuff of that really high level nature. We have others then that have kind of like a decreasing scale, where you have to be clean in your record for so long if you've had this type of a conviction. And an example of that is going to be a lot of the drug-related charges. You can't have any kind of a conviction or a drug-related conviction in 5, 10, or however many the period of time is, years from the time that we run this, just to make sure that you're living that straight and narrow life and not bringing crime into our property.
Mm-hmm.
And then others, they really don't count against the person, and a lot of those are going to be some of the driving offenses. But it just kind of
Sure.
varies per property because it's one of those where they can set their own policy. They just need to be fair and consistent in applying it.
And where are you seeing, people with convicted felons, or that are, getting out of prison, they've done their time, they've paid their debt to society, or that's the theory. Where
Mm-hmm.
are they living, or is it a problem in your area for them to find housing?
I don't know that it's a problem overall. I think a lot of it depends on the type of use of resources. A lot of the places will work with some of these placement groups, and most of the people coming back into society from a prison structure are going to have a caseworker or a success worker that's meant to help them reintegrate back into this world versus the world where it's very structured and they're basically told what they're going to do every day. So a lot of times we find that if they're working with a caseworker, and there are several companies that have them, they're going to be more successful because those people already have connections in place where the property management companies will accept them and work with them just because they have that extra set of eyes on them. Now, the folks that choose not to utilize those resources do tend to have a harder problem, but sometimes that refusal of using the resource is just because they don't want to be accountable. Sometimes it's just
Sure.
because that structure of accountability just doesn't work for them overall. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, those folks may end up homeless or staying at the camps or at the shelters, but there are a lot of resources available. It's just a matter of how much they want to reach out for them and work with the caseworker that gets assigned to them and follow the rules to a degree. I'm not saying 100% every time is going to fall into that qualification, but there are programs set up there because obviously we need them to reintegrate back into society in a successful way and not reoffend.
Well, that sounds very promising that there are structured, there is a structure or process for people reentering society. And then I wanted to ask you too, Shawna, do you also work with the tenants? And is there a program for them?
I do work with the tenants. So with the crime-free multi-housing program, I mentioned before, it's a 3-phase program. Phase 1 is the management education. They take my class, they work closely with my office. They're considered Phase 1 certified. SEPTED is Phase 2, and it's a pass-failure. They meet all 7 criteria or they don't. And once they pass all 7, they're considered Phase 2. Phase 3, it's tenant education. And that's where once a year I get to come into the property and I get to do a presentation, a safety talk. Just we kind of tailor it to whatever the clientele of the property happens to be. But it's my chance as a law enforcement official to come in and interact with the people and maybe spread a little bit of a crime-free message. So when I go to these locations, I try to pull the stats and see what the feel for that property happens to be, because I don't want to talk about things that aren't pertinent to their neighborhood. So I try to really tailor it to them, and then that's kind of an open forum from there. It's Q&A. It's their chance to either tell me some things that they're seeing, to complain about things that they want us to give extra attention to. Maybe they want to tell us the things they're really glad that we're doing in their neighborhood, or just get to know us as officers as well. So that is Phase 3, tenant education. And once all 3 phases are met, a property is considered fully certified in the program.
Well, that's a very comprehensive program. And what kind of a response are you getting from the tenants? Do you get a good turnout?
I do get a good turnout most of the time. I've gone to some of these, we call them tenant socials. And in the first couple of years, it takes a while for it to catch on. We usually encourage management to think of some kind of a bait item, kind of like you're going fishing. So offer barbecue food for free, bring in some pizzas.
Sure.
If you have a large collection of children at your property, maybe a bounce house and a clown or something, make it fun, make it something they want to come to so that you're going to be successful. But I've gone to some of them where we just have 10 or 15 people. I had one this week where I had over 200 people at. So it could be literally anything under the sun, but largely it's based on the type of effort that I'm seeing from the management on getting the people to want to come.
And Shawna, can you think of an example of a property or an owner that may have had multiple properties where you got involved through this, through your program, and they were able to go from having, crime to really getting it on the, really minimizing the crime on their property. Does anything come to mind?
I have so many, just general examples of that because the program itself is so successful. If I see a property popping up on a watch report over and over and over again, and then I go and I run the isolated data for that location and I see that we've got a lot of Part 1 crimes, which basically means, your robberies, your assaults, your gun crimes, that's when I'm really going to sit down and want to hone in on what the management's doing and what other resources we can throw at that area. But ultimately, once they start participating and helping us, because it can't just be us trying to clean up a problem. If we as police
Sure.
are doing everything we can, but management or the tenants are enabling it, then it's a futile attempt. We have to work together, and this partnership is what the program's all about. So once we start working as partners in the community, partners in crime fighting, then it cleans up so much. I've got properties literally on every side of town where sometimes we've had to go through and do massive evictions. And I say we in that I'm providing all of the data and the research and the crime and the criminal code violation statistics to the property manager. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, that property manager has to be the one to do the filings and to be an active property manager. So when we work hand in hand together, we've gone through some properties and evicted 85% of the residents because they were not following the rules and they were creating an unsafe situation. Ultimately applied good screening practices, replaced all of them with good quality tenants, and now they're like non-existent when I run crime stats, and that's a good thing. If I run a place and I get 0 results back for the week, that tells me we weren't there at all this week, and that's exactly what I want to see.
Yes, that's, as a property owner, that's what every property owner wants to see too. And do you think, generally speaking, that property owners are aware that your program exists?
To a degree. I think we're a really well-kept secret in some ways. Most of the time, property owners that are not attached to the large commercial companies find out about my program or that my job even exists when they have a problem and they're calling the police department saying, hey, this is what my problem is, what am I supposed to do? And then they get routed down to me. And I get that a lot. I didn't even know you had this program.
Sure.
The larger companies, because they have, maybe 30 or 40 of them spread out around my city, they're aware because it only takes me working with one of their managers and then the word spreads like wildfire. So I'm slowly getting everyone educated to the fact that we exist and that there are other ways to combat their problems, but I'll take any help I can get in spreading the good word.
Yes, and I think that is, something that, property owners generally are not aware of this program. And do you have any idea, Shawna, how many, is this a pretty common program? Do you think most cities offer what you do?
There are a lot of cities throughout the state of Iowa that have a program like this. And let me back it up just a little bit further. I mentioned this program originated in Mesa, Arizona. Since the time of its inception, it's actually become an international program. But it's one of those programs where you have to have a host law enforcement agency adopt it and apply the manpower, if you will, into running it. So in our situation here in central Iowa, the majority of the metro agencies participate in one way or another. They may not all call it crime-free multi-housing. Some of them just have a community resource officer, for example, that's assigned to deal with some of the housing issues. And in situations like that, I will get phone calls from their people wanting to know what additional resources I can throw towards their agency or ideas, or, we help each other out because that's what you do. And then in other stretches of the state, they don't have it at all, and they'll find out about it again, word of mouth. And I've helped several other agencies bring this program to their city as well. So it's one of those things where it's around and it's around the whole country, but not consistently yet.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our show, Shawna, and if any of our listeners would like to talk to you about getting this program available in their market, would it be all right if they contacted you?
Yeah, I would welcome them to contact me. Email is probably about the easiest way because I'm in and out a lot, meeting with property managers and talking about crime and how we can stop it. So I can get my email contact information to you to post if you like. Otherwise, if anyone wants to write it down, it's smisaac@dmgov.org.
Okay. Would you repeat that for our listeners, Shawna?
Yep, absolutely. smisaac, and Isaac is spelled ISAAC, so smisaac@dmgov.org.
Okay. So Shawna will be willing to talk to any of our listeners about establishing a program like this in their market. And I wanted to ask you, one more question, Sean, and that is about the crime-free lease addendum. Is that, obviously states have different laws, but is that something that the police provide for landlords, or what is that?
So the crime-free lease addendum is an extra piece of paper. It's an extra insurance policy, we'll call it, that you as a property manager can incorporate into your lease packet. It's not a packet of its own, it's just one piece of paper, but it basically in short form says that I, the renter, am agreeing that I will participate in no form of criminal activity, and it lists out all these different types of criminal activity. That I will not participate in any kind of criminal activity. I won't endorse it. I won't allow people here that do this type of activity, because basically if I do, I'm agreeing right here and now that I'm going to lose my housing privileges at your property. And when managers take my phase 1 management training course, I give them a big binder of materials. Mm-hmm. And one of the things in that binder of materials is a copy of that crime-free lease addendum.
Yes, I think it's a very good addendum, and I think what you just said is basically incorporated into the lease of probably many, if not most, landlords. The thing that's different about your crime-free lease addendum is it's one page, and so it probably has a little more oomph to it than just building it into the body of the lease agreement.
So absolutely. And I tell them, put it on a separate color of paper of its own when you stick it in there, because like you said, the key is that it's one page and it does have a lot of oomph to it. Make it stand out, use it, and that's going to help you when you have to go to court.
Well, that's an excellent suggestion. Just that suggestion alone is, I think that would be very significant for most residents when they're signing a lease, that it would kind of dawn on them that, ooh, they're really serious about making this a crime-free property, and they have a zero tolerance.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Advertise to your prospective clients that we work hand in hand with the police department, and if they don't like that, then you know right away that you're going to have a problem.
Yes, that's an excellent idea. Well, Shawna, thank you so much. This has been a very chock full of great ideas for making properties more secure for our residents and safer. So thank you, Shawna.
Yes, thank you for having me on today.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll be on next week, and our guests will be George Allen and Tammy Funk, and they will be speaking about the George Allen Roundtable, September 6th, 7th, and 8th in Indianapolis. We'll talk to everybody next week. And the notes from Shawna's presentation will be on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next week.